It's 12 o'clock. We're live on City Line. I'm Jackie Hall.
And I'm Dan Henson. You know, during this holiday season, many of us will reflect on the true meaning of Christmas. That is the birth of Christ.
For most of us, the image of Christ is of a white male with blonde hair and blue eyes.
It is this image of the divine that an organization known as C.R.A.I.D, or the Committee for the Removal of All Images of the Divine, is against.
Assessing the concerns facing Black America, I'm T. Montier, and we'll do that with Johnny Jacobs, president of the National Urban League.
My name is Tim Watts, and today on the entertainment page, it's another City Line double music video mix. We've got Jimmy Cliff and Melba Moore, and Dick Gregory and Hustler Magazine are going into business together.
Does the personification of Christ we most often see cause blacks to feel inferior?
We're going to ask Imam Ronald Shakir of the Baltimore Masjid of the World Community of Al-Islam in the West.
We'll ask him that and much more when City Line continues.
Good afternoon and welcome to City Line. You know, in preparation for the show today, City Line took its cameras to Mondier Shopping Center. And we asked a question of the people on the street in Mondier. We asked them simply, what is your image of the divine?
When I think of the divine physically, I picture a very bronzed man with a struggle on his face, a look of hard times but determination.
The image that I have been taught to believe in is tall, blonde, blue eyes, and I like to think that is, you know, just something that is imaginary.
Well, I don't believe that there is any image. God is a spirit, and therefore he has no physical features. If there were any physical features, he'd look like a human, because in the Genesis it said that we were made after his image, and so therefore we would be similar to him. So I don't know that he has any real physical features in that he is a spirit.
Well, I think he's not really a special color. I think he's all colors.
I feel as though, you know, he's not really a white man at all.
He's tall and long hair, sometimes white and sometimes it's dark.
He's a person that's tall and he has long hair, you know, but I never thought about him as being, you know, white or black. I've always thought of him as being a supreme being.
When I think of the divine, I think of a strong grandfather figure who is troubled and cares a lot and wants to see great things happen, but I'm sure he's pretty disappointed with the world as it is today.
Those were some of the comments of people that we met at Mondier Shopping Center. We now want to talk with Imam Ronald Shakir, who is the leader of the Baltimore Masjid of the World Community of Al-Islam in the West. Welcome to City Line today.
Thank you.
What is your response to some of the comments that you heard, and what is the image that we see that you're taking issue with?
Well, let me, if I can, just begin by saying that our organization is now called the American Muslim Mission. We had one period of being called the World Community of Al-Islam, but today we are the American Muslim Mission.
Thank you for that correction.
And as far as the comments that we have just heard signify very clearly the problem that we have addressed in terms of the problem in having racial divinities or idols that we consider divine, which we find in all Scripture, that tell us that idolatry is against what the Creator, the Supreme Being, desires. And in most Scripture, it tells us it's one of the things that is most hated in the sight of Almighty God, as is commonly called in the American society. So, and the problems, and the reason that as we look at it and we study the reason for this, we find out that the reason that this should be hated, and by any intelligent thinking person, is because of the problems that is created. If you see that which is divine, that which has power over, not only power over, but that force that originated death and life, that is so infinite that we could reduce it to something finite that we could touch and identify with our senses. So, and then to put that supreme being inside of a frail, weak human form, and then to select one particular form to put it in. This creates problems for human beings in terms of their self-development, self-growth, and all of those types of things. So we, not only are we, but we're against it because God is against it.
Okay, we have so much more to talk with the Imam Ronald Shakir when we continue next on City Line.
City Line is back, and we're discussing the committee to remove all images that attempt to portray the divine with Imam Ronald Shakir, who is the leader of the Baltimore Masjid of the American Muslim Mission, which is located on Wilson Street right here in Baltimore. Imam, just before we went away, you were explaining the problem with the images that portray the divine. And I do want to remind the people at home that you can join in our discussion, first of all, by calling 481-1313. But just before we went away, we were discussing this image. I've noted for the last several years that many of the Christian churches in the area have begun to change the image from a white image, a tall white image, as many of the people mentioned in the tape segment, to a black image. Is that what you're looking for?
No, not at all. Any image of divine is wrong, and as we perceive this from Scripture, and I think any intelligent group of people that are studying the great potential and what religion does for humanity, because human beings are the one that need religion, and what it does for human beings. I think once they realize this, I think they would be against that also. Not recently, but in the 60s, a group of black educators did a study. I think Kenneth Clark, a black psychologist, led this study, where they placed little dolls, white image dolls and black image dolls, in a room with little, I think, elementary age children, blacks and whites. And they discovered that none of the children chose to play with the African American image dolls. And from this, they surmised that not seeing enough images of themselves in the textbooks, at that time, Spot, Jane, Dick were all you saw in educational material, especially at the elementary school level. So from this, they surmised that this was creating all sorts of inferiority complexes and other learning difficulties in African American children. So from this, we had this whole movement to put more black images in textbooks. Now, they surmised and developed and saw this problem of learning and development in children because of these not seeing their image. Then we look at something we consider divine and the impact that this had and the power and authority that this has over the life of a human being. Then we place God Almighty, Allah, as he's called in Al-Islam. We place this supreme being, and we say that he's inside of a person. And this person that he's inside of is a Caucasian. And not only is he Caucasian, he's the son, the child, and all of these things.
Do you say then that portraying Christ as a white male is causing blacks to feel inferior?
Oh, it is the root of the problems that African Americans and non-Caucasian people have the world over, that have taken and absorbed this idea that God had a child, and this child was not only God. They believed that the child became God personified, and this personification took place inside of a Caucasian person, even though there's no place in Scripture, even if we had to use an image and had to go by the Bible description of this man Jesus, it would not be a Caucasian. In the Bible, it says that this man that they are referring to had hair like lamb's wool, feet like burnt brass, and so forth, which would allude to a different type of person.
All right, Imam, if you're successful, if C.R.A.I.D is successful in removing all images of the divine, so what? I mean, what does that solve?
Well, that same question should have been proposed, if it didn't mean anything, to Kenneth Clark and those others. Say, what is the use of taking Dick, Jane, and Spot out and putting some African Americans in the
Dick, Jane, and
textbook?
Spot and Tarzan are still images that the black kids and white kids see.
Yes, they see them, but I'm saying it gives us equal, it suggests, see, we learn. We come in the world with no knowledge at all. We develop, and whatever we become that based upon the knowledge and information that we absorb from the environment in which we exist. If we exist in an environment that not only tell us that the reason our skin is the color that it is because we are cursed, because we're the children of Ham, and Ham was the son of Noah, and Noah got drunk, and Ham, so you're cursed to be the color you are. That's a curse upon you. This is coming out of Scripture. So you are cursed. And God had children, he had a family, and he was personified in another image.
Let me interrupt you.
Psychological problems, inferiority complex, and all these things, and these polarities among the people.
Okay,
we hear all the time.
What about the flip side of that? What about the flip side of that? Since the image that we most often see is of a white male, what does that do for those people who have that same likeness?
Give them a false superiority complex, that they are superior above anyone else on the planet Earth. Gives them that Superman and that whole Hitler complex, that they are super people, a super race, and everyone else must be subservient and serve them because they are in the family of God and you're not.
Let's bring in our home audience right now. Hi, would you like to talk with our guest this morning?
Hello?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Hi, my name is Alita Harrison.
Go ahead.
Hello, yes.
Okay, you cannot listen to yourself on your home television
my name is
set.
Alita Harrison, and what I'm saying, I'm very opposed to what this young man is saying.
Please go ahead.
Well, what I'm saying, I'm sorry, okay, I'm very opposed to what he is saying. Okay, I was raised in a Christian family. We were taught that God is God. He's a supreme being. He's here to help you. We never was taught that he was green, blue, white, or black. I feel all this opposition about this color that they're coming up with is something that was brought up during this Islamism, this thing that he's into, this, what is it, that, I can't think, what is it, Islam,
American Muslim Mission.
faith. I feel that's when all this stuff came up, all this superiority as far as color, that's when all of this stuff came up. Before they found out this Islam and stuff, it was just typical God, just typical supreme being. I feel that regardless of if he's black, green,
Caller,
white,
can I ask you a question, caller?
He's going to serve the same purpose to you, me, or anybody else. And I feel this color thing is just something that something is coming up with within the 80s.
Caller, can I ask you a question?
This was never material to
Could you hold on?
Let me ask you a question, caller. What is your image? What do you think of when you think of the divine?
Well, what I think of when I think of the divine, I feel like that's God. God is,
what does God look like, though?
Individual.
But what does God look like?
What color he is, we won't know what color he is till he get there. Whether he green or blue will not make me live long or make you live long. It won't make us die quicker or make you die quicker. Regardless of what color he is, we're going to live and we're going to die.
Okay. Thank you for calling. We're going to go to another telephone call. Hi, you're on City Line Live.
Good afternoon. I'm calling because I have a question for Mr. Shakir. I'm wondering whether or not you were born Islamic or a Muslim, or is it a faith you adopted?
Well, it was a faith that I adopted. My family, I come out of Louisiana, and my family was Catholic. And I walked away from Christianity as a child, Catholicism particularly as a child, because I was in a segregated environment, very religiously orientated, and discovered as a child that a black man in Louisiana in the 60s could not become a priest, which was I guess the ultimate in terms of your evolution in Catholicism for a male. And when I discovered that, I began to perceive that there were some great injustices, some great problems with that, and I could not comprehend it. And then, during the 60s was the time of the great civil rights movement, began to give me a better focus on the world and reality, and I realized there were some problems here. And so from there, I just got away from religion, period.
What was the importance of your question, caller?
I wanted to point out that, particularly in any society or in any group of people, when a religious force tries to indoctrinate others, they tend to adopt patterns like the group that they want to bring in. For example, in this country, which is primarily white, I think that it is just logical that the image that most Americans perceive of the divine be Caucasian, streaming blonde hair and blue eyes, although it's illogical according to the Bible.
We're going to have to go to a break now, and thank you so much.
Okay, we're going to come back with Imam Ronald Shakir right after this.
Now here's this week's community calendar. If your group or organization would like to announce an event, please write us in care of City Line, WJZ-TV, Television Hill, Baltimore, Maryland 21211, or call us for further information at 466-0013 between the hours of 9 and 5. Line talking about the images of the divine with Imam Ronald Shakir. We're going to take a question from our audience first.
Imam Shakir, my question relates directly to what Mr. Henson was talking about in the beginning. That is Christmas. Does racial image of divine have any relationship or influence on the upcoming holiday Christmas?
Yes, it does. As far as I perceive it, and I think many of our members of our community perceive it, being that we do not involve ourselves in the celebration of this particular holiday, even recognizing that it is a very high holy day with the Christian community. But the problem that we see again with that, we have again, that's generally and primarily Caucasian image in the religion where, and it takes away from parents. Parents work very hard struggling to buy these high-priced items for their children. And then someone has told them that they should not take the credit for this. They should not imbibe from their children the respect, the honor, the love for this blood and sweat that they go through to make this a happy occasion for them. Instead of that, they have been orientated to transfer all of this hard work and labor and everything to some other image, some other creature, some other person. And they lose all of that respect. So the family life is, again, degenerates instead of building up at this particular period. So, yes, it is a problem. It's a great problem for the family. It's a great problem for not only African-American families in this sense, but these idolatry, these images just creates problems. Okay. And may I say this, though, before we go to that phone caller? We are not, our intention is not to stop people from worshiping as Christians or Jews or whatever. It's to deal with a problem that affects humanity generally.
Okay, let's take another question from home. Hi, you're live on City Line.
Yeah, my name is Charles Shaw. I'm calling with regards to what is happening on the screen right now. I don't think God has any image. I think we human beings, we are only trying to create something out of nothing, you know, regardless of whatever religion one believes in. According to Jean Paul Sartre, he says man is freedom. And if man is freedom, everyone has the right to decide or to believe in whatever he or she wants to believe in. I think if one look into this present-day society, one will be able to understand that religion itself is just an instrument for oppression. You can imagine what really happens to my fellow black brothers and sisters in this society, you know, during the period of slavery. You know, all these white people, the notion of white God, white Christ, is total bullshit, you know. And I think if God really exists, you know, is basically the black man, really, because if you really go into the Bible, one will be able to understand. And a whole lot of all these white crazy people out here, you know, they keep on saying Christ is white, Christ is this. That is why I have problem understanding the Christian doctrine.
Thank you so much for your comment.
Thank you. We have a question from the audience. Yes, sir.
Yes, I'd like to ask a question in reference to the activity that went on this summer as far as the walking or demonstration around the church. I'd like to know the purpose behind that. And the other part of the question is this C.R.A.I.D or the idea of C.R.A.I.D only an Islamic concern? Is this a Christian concern or a Jewish concern as well?
Thank you. Yes. To take the first part of your question, I think we, as many may know, during last year and much of the summer, we were appealing in the community, and primarily we used the area of religious institutions as an appeal to religious people and God-conscious people in terms of having images of the divine and the problem, simply to put it on the mind. I mean, we have no power.
So you were marching around churches?
Oh, yes. We have no power, no authority to change people. We don't have that kind of power. But we wanted to put the concern, the idea, on the mind of human beings.
What kind of response did you get?
We got some favorable and some not favorable. We got all types of response. It ran the gamut. We got supporters in other religious communities, and some we didn't. But it was not to, and this, you know, to change people. We listen, some of the best people I know are
so
Christians.
I guess you've answered the second part of the question also, in that this is not just an Islamic
Right, it's a concern of all God-conscious people.
Let's try to get a quick one in. Good afternoon. You're live on City Line.
Yes, I would like to say Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
And
go ahead, please.
yes, and I would like to also say that, first of all, our people must get rid of the slave mentality that they had. Okay? They also must know the history, you know, of religion before they could.
Miss, you're listening to yourself on television. You're holding up the conversation. Could you just talk to us?
Yes, I'm saying also they should also know the history of religion. Okay, I don't think it's a matter of color, but it's the thing of why do they use images in the first place when in the Bible it says that there are no, you know, there's supposed to be, that's idol worship.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you
the
so
fact
much.
is that images have been used all through history to depict God. Maybe not man-like images or human images, but images have always been used.
But we have to understand that the images have been used as a political instrument. The images in religion have been used as political instrument to oppress, suppress, and control particular groups of people in the world. Because no scripture, none, point to the fact that they should have images of the divine, especially the monotheistic faith.
So we should just simply eliminate all images.
And worship God as a spirit that no one has ever laid eyes upon.
All righty. Thank you so much for coming by to talk with us about the issue.
My pleasure.
Imam Ronald Shakir of the American Muslim Mission and the C.R.A.I.D organization. Thank you. We'll be back in just a moment. We'll take a break now.
Good afternoon. We're back now on City Line, and for today's Newscap segment, we will feature an interview with Johnny Jacobs, president of the National Urban League. Mr. Jacob, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
1984 seems to be shaping itself into a pretty interesting year. What do you see as some of the significant factors that will impact on Black America? Let's start off politically.
Well, clearly the election is going to occupy the major agenda items for America generally and for Black America. And Jesse Jackson's presence in that hunt for the prize is clearly going to make some significant contributions to that. It will clearly, in my judgment, energize the black community. It will clearly liberate America from the notion that high office is reserved for white males. And it will clearly challenge America, both Jesse's party, it will challenge the black community, it will challenge the media. It will challenge Jesse's party because his white opponents must compete with him for black votes just like he must compete with them for white votes. It will challenge Black America because we have to make certain that we do not get into the position where Jesse's candidacy deludes us into thinking that that will generate all the black votes that we need. Black organizations must carry that responsibility. And it will challenge the media because we must make sure that the media does not paint the picture that the fate of Black America rides or falls on Jesse's candidacy.
Is the Urban League in support of Jackson's candidacy then?
Well, we do not, by virtue of the fact that we're a tax-exempt, nonpartisan agency, get involved in supporting or not supporting. We do think that we have a responsibility to educate the public, and so we will choose to do that.
What is your position on the Reagan administration? I know that during Mr. Jordan's tenure with the Urban League, he was quite an outspoken critic of the White House administration, and in particular Ronald Reagan. I think it was jelly beans. He referred to him as jelly bean candidate or something to that.
Well, I continue to tell the truth about the president and his administration, and in telling the truth, we speak to the fact that he has demonstrated a high degree of insensitivity to the needs of the poor and the disadvantaged, where blacks are disproportionately represented. And also during his administration, there has been a severe assault on the civil rights of poor people and minority people in the nation. And so we continue to speak it the way that it is and let the chips fall where they may.
What do you see 1984 holding for Black Americans educationally and with the oncoming of the high-tech computer age?
Well, I think we have to be clear in understanding that high tech is really no salvation for Black America, and it is no salvation for white America. Because there's already a gap educationally that exists between Black America need and Black America technology and where the country is going, the gap widens with high technology, and therefore to get to that problem, it requires that the public generally extends itself to make sure that blacks are not excluded from that process, and that blacks are included by making all of the technology, by making the equity and the excellence of that technology available to black people.
Let's talk about what happens on the domestic front and what's happening with our family unit. Each year, the Urban League publishes the State of Black America. And recently, you've been very concerned about the increasing numbers of illegitimate births within the black community and female-headed households, and also the poverty level among black female households. Where do we go in terms of addressing that problem?
Well, I think that the black community itself must make an all-out assault on those problems, because they are problems that the black community, in my judgment, can provide the leadership on. And to the degree that we do that, we can then bring into the fold others who are caring and concerned about what happens. I think we have to address forthrightly the high incidence of pregnancies among teenagers. We have to address forthrightly the needs and aspirations and concerns of single female-headed households, and understand that the problem is not simply associated with the fact that they do not have husbands. It is associated with the fact that they are black and female, and therefore faced with racism and sexism, and therefore in the delivery of services and in the availability of resources, they find themselves in double jeopardy. And I believe what we have to clearly make certain is that we bring all of these resources to bear to deal with their problems.
Mr. Jacobs, let's talk briefly, if we can, sir, about unemployment. Unemployment has come to be known as an integral part of the black community and the black teenage community in particular. Now, what are we going to do, sir, about the devastating impact that unemployment is having and will have on the black community? Our unemployment figures have bottomed out at leveled off to about 20%. And of course, you know, within the black teenage community, it's 50%. And it's somewhat a nationally accepted norm.
Well, and it's even worse than that, because you're talking about the officially reported statistics. When you factor in the hidden unemployment, our unemployment for adults is around 31%, and for teenagers is 68 to 70%. So it is a crisis issue. I think the first thing that we have to recognize is that a one-dimensional approach will not resolve that problem. It seems to me that we not only must rely on the private sector carrying its responsibility, but government must also understand that it has a role in dealing with the problem. We've called for in the Urban League a universal employment and training system that provides for the private sector to have a participatory role, but government through public works and public service, providing opportunity for people to work. And fourthly, that we come through with an industrial policy that takes into account that people are being displaced and need to be trained and retrained, and that we ought to find a way, using our public policy, to address the magnitude of the problem concerning black adults and teenagers in dealing with unemployment.
What part of dealing with the unemployment problem in black America lies within black America and us channeling our spending resources, our capital, buying businesses, and re-employing our own? How do you see us channeling our spending power in the future?
Clearly, I think that there can be greater contributions on the part of blacks in supporting blacks and black businesses. But I think it would be a mistake for us to place the burden of employing and training blacks on the backs of black businesses. White businesses haven't done it in the past, and black businesses are struggling just to survive. I think we ought to be in business because we ought to be in business. But I think the challenge to the unemployment issue is not only the minimal part that blacks can play, black business can play, but the maximum role that the private sector must play and the maximum role that the government must play in helping us to assault that problem.
And one final question, sir, if you can deal in analogies, and if you charted or if you describe the progress of black America in terms of a mode of transportation, in terms of getting us from point A, where we began in this country, to point B, where we want to be today in 1983 and beyond, how would you describe that mode of transportation? How would you describe it? Are we traveling on a car? Are we traveling by horseback? Are we traveling by plane? And have we gotten there yet?
Well, I think we may very well be traveling by train, but we're traveling on several tracks. And part of the difficulty is that as we escalate to move certain blacks into the American mainstream, there's another track that is leaving massive numbers of blacks behind. And I think that what we have to recognize is getting a few up the track is not the solution to the problem. The true test is how we get that mass up the track so that we are dealing with an improvement in the total condition that confronts black America and America generally.
Mr. Jacobs, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
We're back on City Line, and you know, one of the most exciting things to happen in this country in the last couple of years has been the opening up of the space program to non-traditional people. And we did a special, as you remember, on Colonel Guy Bluford, who was the first black astronaut, and we've got with us today an additional black astronaut, Colonel Fred Gregory. Colonel, welcome. We're glad to have you with us today.
Thank you, Dan.
And also, and also we've got Colonel Henson, Carol Henson. I should never forget that. Carol Henson, who is the Director of Public Affairs at Baltimore Washington International Airport. And the purpose of them being here today is to, Colonel Gregory is in town to kick off a exhibit at Baltimore Washington International Airport called Black Wings. And tell us a little bit about the exhibit.
Well, I was invited to come up, and it's certainly a pleasure to come to see it. It's basically recognition of our past, a past that I really didn't know anything about until 1975 or so. I never realized that there were black pilots. I never knew that we had a significant military force fighting in World War II and did very well in World War II. And I'm just privileged and proud to come up here and basically see my past and see those people who allowed me to be where I am now.
Well, we're extremely happy to have you. And Mr. Henson, I just might ask you, you know, the exhibit is at BWI. It starts today.
Yes, it is. Yes.
And what time does it start?
Well, actually, it does not start today. Today is the premiere showing of the exhibit. Tomorrow is the actual day that it opens to the public. It'll be there from 9 until 8:30 each day, 7 days a week, and it's open to the general public, as we said. And we're inviting people, especially groups, to come out, people of all races, to see this. It starts with Bessie Coleman, who was our first black licensed pilot, who was a woman, of course.
That's right.
And goes right straight through Colonel Gregory here, and it's just a fantastic exhibit. I'm just so excited about having it at the airport.
Why was it so long in coming?
Well, it's been at several other locations around the country. We have the exclusive showing of this exhibit in the Maryland area. When it leaves here, I believe it goes to the New York area. So we've got it for 30 days. It's from the 19th of December through Martin Luther King's birthday on January 15th.
Okay, Colonel, I can't have you here without asking you a little bit about what it took to become an astronaut. Simple, huh?
Well, I started out as a poor little black kid in D.C. and went through Washington public schools and then went out to the United States Air Force Academy. And I had a great desire to fly. I flew many different kinds of airplanes, helicopters and fighters and transport airplanes, and decided I wanted to do a little bit more.
I think your biography tells us you've flown over 40 different types.
I've flown quite a few airplanes. I sometimes forget what they are, but after I'd flown operationally, I decided I wanted to try something else, and so I became a test pilot, went through a test pilot school, the Navy school down in Patuxent, Maryland. And they had an astronaut selection, an announcement for a selection in 1977. I was considering it, but some of those gentlemen that I was mentioning earlier, the Tuskegee Airmen, called me and said, "You should apply to this program." And of course I did, and I was lucky enough to be selected.
How long have you been in the program?
I've been in there now since 1978, about 5.5 years now.
You were talking about the Tuskegee group. Give us some of those names. I know there are a lot of people in our audience that would recognize them.
Well, Chappie James, General Chappie James. There's, you know, there are just many.
General Benjamin Davis.
Davis, of course.
Went through there, and there are just so many of them that we see them daily, and we don't know who they are or what they've done, but it was a very significant program. They were the red tails flying out of Northern Africa and Italy.
Now you'll be going up in space around
next November.
Thanksgiving. What role will you have at that mission?
Well, I'm going to be the pilot on what will be the second Space Lab mission. The one that just landed was a Space Lab mission. They will empty out the Space Lab, the module, and put in some new experiments, and I will be the pilot on that flight.
How long is that flight going to be?
7 days or 8 days or so.
Oh, that's fantastic.
7 days or 8 days or so?
Yes. Well, we don't know.
It's a little bit vague for me. I mean, if I'm going up in
the
space,
last one was supposed to be 8 days, and it ended up being 10 days.
Yeah, I might remind the people at home that you can join in the conversation. Maybe we can get in one phone call by calling 481-1313. Colonel Gregory is here, and one of the things that I wanted to ask him about is his advice to young people about going into the space program.
Well, I have a lot of frustration because we are represented and we are present now, but we look at the pipeline, the people who will follow us, and there are very few, if any, in the pipeline, and so when we finish our program, we're not sure whether we're going to be present anymore, and we might end up being a picture in an airport again as the past.
What kind of preparation would you advise young people to get if they want to go into space?
I think that you really have to have a very well-rounded education. You have to not only be a scientist or an engineer or a mathematician, but you have to be able to speak properly and write properly, have a good idea about American history and world history and economics, and know a little bit about law. And so I would say a liberal arts education, but also a very significant portion of engineering and math. But one thing, you're going to have to want to do that.
But a very kind of silly question, but it's not meant to be frivolous, but doesn't it take a kind of special person and a well-balanced person to be able to take the pressure of the program, and also, if eventually getting into flight, being able to withstand that pressure as well?
Oh, I don't think so. I think the pressures that you see in school and everyday life are as severe as those things that we see in space or that we will experience in space. It's just an extension of your education, and it's actually no more difficult than flying just a regular airplane or driving on the ice in Baltimore sometimes.
Really? I always think you were a special breed of women and men.
Well, you've been reading too many books.
I think we found out already that Colonel Gregory is kind of a modest person. I mean, he is the pilot of the next Space Lab flight to go up, and that's a very special role. As a matter of fact, that's the role that the media pays more attention to, and so we're looking forward to seeing you. Carol, let me just ask you one more time. Black Wings, an exhibit of blacks in aviation.
Yes.
From the beginning?
From the beginning up through the astronaut program and hopefully into the future. We look forward to the general public coming out, and I hope that people really take advantage of this. It's just a beautiful thing to see.
Let me say quickly that I saw it at the Smithsonian a year ago, and it is well worth getting to the Baltimore Washington International Airport to see it. You will enjoy it.
Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.
We're going to take a break and come back with Tim Watts and the entertainment page.
That's Melba Moore with her latest tune, and before that, we saw Jimmy Cliff with Reggae Nights. Look for Melba to star next year in her own comedy TV series. In entertainment news, Cicely Tyson is suing Elizabeth Taylor. Liz Taylor is one of the producers of a Broadway play called The Corn is Green, and Cicely was the star of the show, at least until she missed a performance. She was in the South with her husband, Miles Davis, because he was accepting an award. She missed her plane to New York and could not perform that night. Liz Taylor promptly fired Cicely, so she is now suing Liz for $625,000. Finally, Hustler magazine has offered Dick Gregory $1.5 million for his weight reduction product, which Hustler will put on the market. So far, Dick has neither accepted nor turned down the offer. Well, it'll be 1984 the next time we get together, so have a great holiday. My name is Tim Watts.
That's today's edition of City Line. We do, however, want to remind you of a couple things. First of all, letters. One of the ways in which we plan how to do future shows, one of the ways in which we know whether or not we're doing what you want us to do, is by you writing to us. And so we would like you to give us a little note to let us know all of those things about City Line that you like or don't like, or for that matter, what you want us to do in the future.
Plus, we just enjoy hearing from you anyway.
And it's so nice reading your letters. We do read all of them, even if we don't get a chance to answer all of them personally. And we do answer some of them.
Oh, indeed
from time
we
to time.
do, sure.
Yeah. Also, the audience. You notice that City Line does have an audience every week. And if you'd like to be in our audience for any of the shows that are coming up, you can give us a call at 466-0013 anytime during the week. And just ask to be on City Line, and we'll try to line it up for you. Now, coming up in the future. First of all, next week, Christmas, City Line will not be here. We're preempted. And we're preempted for a Christmas special.
Yes.
And so you won't really see us until the first of the year again. Tim said you'll see us the first 1984. And we're going to come back with a New Year's survival kit on January 1st. First of all, we're going to be talking about crime prevention. We're also going to be talking about credit counseling for those of you who spent too much money over the holidays. And I think you're going to find it very helpful as the year goes on. On January 8th, the Organization for the Enforcement of Child Support is going to be with us. Very serious problem, child support, and I think you're going to be wanting to watch us. And then on January 15th, only for the second time of the year, we're going to be preemptive, and City Line will not be on again. Jackie?
Right. On January 22nd, we're going to have something that's going to be a very hot issue. It's called man sharing. There are those out there who believe that there is a shortage of men and that the only way some women will have men is simply to decide deliberately that they will share with other women, one man or two.
Whether they know it or not.
Okay, so that's January 22nd. And on January 29th, we'll have a group that was scheduled once before but that has been rescheduled called Blacks for Reagan. And we'll have them on the set and we will talk to them.
And so that's the month of January, and we'll be happy if you're with us. But remember, give us your letters, give us your calls to let us know whether or not you want to be on the audience. Since we won't be on Christmas, we want to do our little Christmas salute to you right now.
And bring our family before you now and introduce you to some of those good people who help put the show together, some of the creative minds. You know, we're just the mouthpieces who sit out front, but some of these people are the ones who actually created. And we'd like to open it all up now and show some of the City Line family members. To my immediate left is Ernest Winborn, who is the associate producer of City Line. Don't say anything, just nod your head. Happy holiday.
All of those nice little tapes that you see at the beginning of the show, and the way that we know that we're not on the air too long, Ernest takes care of all of that.
And the lady next to him you certainly recognize, that's Ms. T, as opposed to Mr. D. And next to T is Cecilia Finney, who is our intern from Loyola. Loyola College.
Loyola College, right. And Denise LaFranc is also another intern.
That's right.
And to my immediate right also is Marilyn and Barbara, and who are also interns with City Line. And I guess we got to do this. We're forced to make note of the fact that there's a guy back in the control room who is our producer, but he's also our director, which means that he's back there now working very hard. And his name is what is his name? Reggie Wright. Reginald Wright is the producer and the creative mind behind City Line.
And you can see how clever he is like this, right? There he
Reggie,
is.
you're not supposed to do that.
He's very clever.
But he's sitting back there now. Hi, Reg. And
we're missing one member of the family.
We're missing
That's
Tim Watts.
But you just saw him on tape, and unfortunately he wasn't able to come here live today.
And so now we want to take 2 seconds. We got 2 seconds left, guys. We want to take 2 seconds and give it a quick countdown. Well, actually, I got to give you a 3-second countdown. And we want to say Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to all the folks at home. 1, 2, 3. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
And Happy Kwanzaa as well.
That's this week's edition of City Line.